Good morning and welcome to our latest edition of Coffee with the Candidate. And actually, we should rebrand this particular segment with Coffee with the Candidates because joining me today is candidate for State House Rep for District 87 is Michael Bennett-Spears. Welcome, Michael.
Hi there, how are you doing?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. On previous installments, I've had people who are running for different office, people who are currently in office, people who have inspired and helped support other candidates. And I am so excited to have you as a fellow candidate for your House rep race, and just to kind of talk to you a little bit about your campaign, what's been happening with you since the onset, what changes you've made, and we'll just have a discussion and just share a little bit with everyone about your campaign, and I can share my experiences for the people, because I love this cross-pollination between our different groups of people. And so we both get exposure to each other's followers, and I'm really, really excited about that. So kicking it off, Michael, please introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your background and why it is that you're running for the State House position.
All righty. Well, as you said, my name is Michael Bennett-Spears. I'm running for the Arkansas State House of Representatives in District 87. So that's going to cover the areas from Siloam Springs, Tawnytown, Elm Springs, and this little part of western Springdale. So basically it's the 412 corridor is a good way to kind of describe my district's boundaries. And as far as to how I got into this is a story I absolutely love to tell, because it was 6 days before the filing deadline when a good friend of mine posted on Facebook that my opponent was unopposed. And all of a sudden my phone started blowing up to people going, Michael, why don't you do this? You live in Siloam Springs. You've got a lot to say. You care about people. You love politics. You should run. And so I messaged that friend and said, hey, what would this look like? Like, I've never honestly considered running for office. And the next thing I know, about 15 minutes after that, I had a campaign.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And after I had said, okay, you know what, I'll do it. This sounds great. That was when they informed me, oh, well, great. Now that you've agreed to it, you need to raise $3,000 in the next 6 days.
Oh, 6 days. Mm-hmm.
Yes. We actually raised that in 2 days.
Wow.
Which was a really exciting thing and was kind of the first thing that really made me feel like I took a step in the right direction.
Good.
You know, it was when I saw the support that people gave, that people believed in this campaign.
Wow. So, you and I have a lot in common as it relates to politics, because this is your first campaign, right?
Yes.
As it is mine. So we're both learning about politics, campaigning, particularly in Arkansas, rules, ins and outs, do's and don'ts.
Yes. And so it definitely, being a first-time candidate, as if that wasn't fun enough, now we're both first-time candidates in the midst of this pandemic, which is a completely different ballgame, quite frankly.
Yeah. So what are some of the changes that you've made in your campaign? I know what we typically would have been doing, but what kind of modifications did you make to your campaign due to the pandemic?
Well, what we did as far as modifying the campaign was, of course, I think the most responsible thing to do was to forego door knocking, which is the standard plan for campaigns, and to focus a lot more on things like this, on doing virtual videos, Zoom meetings, social media. And of course, later in the year, we'll focus very big on mailers. We also, which mailers, just getting information out to the community by sending little pamphlets and such to people. Right. One of the things that I'm really proud of with my campaign is that we redirected our phone banking to actually just calling members of the community and saying, how are you doing? How can we help? For the first little bit, we actually didn't even go into politics. Right. We would just say, this is my name, I'm with Michael Bennett-Spears campaign, but the reason I'm calling today is we know this is a crisis, we know people need help. Can we connect you with resources? Is there something you need?
Wow, wow, that's great. That's another similarity. Since we did the exact same thing, it just didn't feel appropriate, prudent, or just even uh, important to be campaigning while people are anxious and nervous and uncertain about their health situation, about their employment situation, about what is going to happen with their children going to school or not going to school. So being mindful of those changes in our world and making those adaptations, I think are as public servants and hopefully elected officials, we're setting a good track record for making sure we have a heart for the community. So I appreciate that about you as well and those modifications that you've made. So tell the people a little bit about what are some of your core issues? What are some of the things that really mean a lot to you? That when you decided to campaign, that you said, this is going to be something that that I stand on, is really important to me.
And probably the biggest one for my campaign is affordable and accessible healthcare. That is a major piece of my platform, and a lot of that has to do with my personal experience growing up. When I was a kid in Northeast Arkansas, I had a poor family in a rural area. Anyone who's in those areas knows that healthcare is not accessible quite frequently, particularly if you're lower income. And so I experienced my dad getting very sick when I was 11 years old and eventually passing away my senior year of high school. We went through this long, drawn-out battle that, quite frankly, at the end of the day, he probably would have survived had he had health care. About 3 days after he passed away, we got a phone call that he had been denied insurance because of a misfiled piece of paper.
Oh my goodness.
We also found out that he had a perfectly treatable form of cancer, and that was what had killed him. So had he had access to affordable health care, I would probably still have my dad today. That's a big one for me because I know that my story is unfortunately not unique at all. I've talked to too many people who share that story.
Wow.
And so that's a big one for me going into the legislators, finding ways that we can improve the efficiency of healthcare in the state. That's a big one because it's far too tangled right now. It shouldn't be so complicated to literally take care of your health. Outside of that one, education's another big one because once again, growing up in a small, poor rural community, our schools were not well funded. And I didn't realize just how much I was missing out in that area until I went to the Arkansas School for Mathematics and Sciences, now Arkansas School of Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts, in Hot Springs when I was 16 years old. And that gave me the opportunity to really see what a well-funded school could provide for students and the opportunities that were available to them. And I look at that and I think that every student in Arkansas deserves those opportunities. You shouldn't be depending on someone noticing you and pulling you out of your rural district for you to have the opportunities that I was given.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of these things are really, the importance of them has been shown even more so right now during this pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
If you look at the people who are terrified of getting sick, but they can't afford to miss work.
Right.
And so, or you look at the teachers who completely changed their game plan basically overnight to switch to a virtual model.
Oh, yeah.
But still can't afford the supplies for their classroom. And these are all problems that we need to address. We need to fix. We need to put these safety nets in place.
Well, they existed prior to this pandemic.
Yes.
And the pandemic just illuminated vividly, without any, shade whatsoever, that so many of our systems are broken.
Yes.
Education system, access to healthcare, seeing the disparity in the impact and the death toll for coronavirus and COVID-19 for communities of color, knowing that those in more remote areas, particularly the children who are going to school in the more remote areas, may not have the technology or the broadband to be able to keep up with their studies. We saw disparities in the housing system. We saw how our economic situation, where we're built on, the essential workers continuing to go to work, not having not even having the wages to continue to care, their basic essential needs, while they're caring for us who are sitting at home. It was just, it was mind blowing.
Yeah, it eliminated. I've said many times, if anything positive comes out of this crisis, it's that it showed us every gap in our system.
Oh, it definitely did.
In clear detail.
Yeah.
If to go into another issue that my campaign's focused on is fair living wages for people.
Yeah.
If you look at many of our workers who are declared essential, because they are the workers at Walmart. You and I would not be able to buy groceries if there were not the employees at Walmart.
Right. Or the truck drivers, or
exactly. But if you look at those workers and what they're being paid,
right,
they're essential in putting their life on the line, but they still go home at the end of the week and try to figure out how they're going to pay their bills.
Right.
That tells me that even though we've made progress with raising the minimum wage, we've still got a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do because there are too many people who are unable to afford just the basic living essentials.
Yes.
And I think the number is like 40% of Arkansans are unable to afford basic essentials of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's abysmal.
Yeah, it's unacceptable.
And when so many people are relying on the work and the efforts of these essential workers, and they're not getting the unemployment because they're essential. So they're going to work, they're exposing themselves and their families to this virus, and they're keeping the economy going, they're keeping commerce going, they're keeping the food supply going, they're keeping all of these, essential functions operating. But for, and they're not being compensated, and they're not being, rewarded appropriately. So many of our campaign platforms align with healthcare, education, and the economy. The other thing that's a big piece for me is inclusion.
Yes.
And working on having more inclusive Northwest Arkansas, more inclusive state of Arkansas. Unfortunately, that's a challenge for our state and has resulted in us receiving less than favorable ratings as it relates to quality of life, because we don't have a much more inclusive culture, and we don't have actually the laws that prevent, the state laws that don't prevent against discrimination based on sex or national origin or gender identity or sexual orientation. So we've got to do better at making sure that we're creating a state that welcomes everyone, so that we can, be able to build a much more prosperous, a much more diverse, a much more forward-thinking, progressive state, and to continue to elevate, throughout the state.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up inclusion, because that's one that was what got me into politics. Really, was when I lived down in Fayetteville, I worked with the For Fayetteville campaign to pass the anti-discrimination legislation that went through in Fayetteville. That was our means of attempting to prevent the discrimination based on gender identity, et cetera, with that. Now, unfortunately, that law was rolled back by the state when they passed a rule that cities could not pass their own anti-discrimination ordinances.
Right.
That being said, though, we've still made a lot of progress. And I would be remiss as a openly gay candidate if I didn't mention the fact that it's Pride Month
Yes.
right now. And that's a big one for the LGBTQ community. That's where we take that month to not only celebrate who we are, but to join together to kind of recharge, is how I often look at it. You know, like you go through the year and there are still struggles with the LGBTQ community. But then you have this big, beautiful celebration and it washes all of that away. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we're not getting to do that this year. We recently announced that Siloam Pride, I'm not sure what we're doing there. We're still kind of planning on that one. Fayetteville's Pride has gone fully virtual. They announced that a few days ago. And so that's one that we're navigating through. And I think, though, that one thing that we really need to look at is the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now. I think that with it being Pride Month, it's important to, how do I express this? To encourage the LGBTQ plus community to look at the Black activists that got us to where we are, that got us to the point where I can sit here and say, I'm an openly gay man and I'm running for office. I'm the first openly gay man to run in my district. And I like to say, when elected in November, I will be the first openly gay man to ever serve in the Arkansas state legislature. And that is the definition of pride for me.
Right.
I mean, that's one that I get a little bit emotional when I talk about. Yeah. And I think that in correlation with what we're seeing in the movement with Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQ plus community has to recognize the work done by Black activists to get us to this point. That if it wasn't for so many POC activists, I couldn't be sitting here today talking to you saying, I'm an openly gay candidate. You know, we have Marsha P. Johnson, who is credited with starting the Stonewall riots, which were the turning point in the LGBTQ plus rights movement. You have Bayard Rustin, who was a key advisor to MLK, and also an openly gay Black man in the 1960s, which the bravery in that right there is an inspiration to anyone who reads his story. And so I think that at this moment, yes, we're not getting to have our pride parades. And that's sad. But we can turn around and redirect those energies to stand with the Black community and to say, so many years ago, and even still, you've had our backs. It's our turn to have yours.
Well, Michael, I can truly, truly appreciate that sentiment in that position, particularly since, you know, of course, with it being Pride, but when you look back on what our country and quite frankly, the world has been going through these last few weeks, and the resurgence all over the world and the resounding reiteration of Black Lives Matter, I think it's important, an important point to make that all of our communities are connected, and that we have, when we uplift one, we uplift them all. And so maybe there is no pride parade, but that doesn't distinguish or extinguish the pride that you have. It doesn't extinguish the achievements that have been made within your community. But I think it also, like you said, it provides an opportunity for you to engage in this movement that is Black Lives Matter, because you also realize that by doing so, your issues are elevated. All of our issues are intertwined, because when we're really talking about humankind, human dignity, human decency, and making sure that no one is treated differently, disparagingly at all because of the color of their skin. And that translates also into your gender identity, sexual orientation. So it's overwhelmingly reassuring and affirming to see so many groups of people demonstrating and claiming and proclaiming that Black Lives Matter from all walks of life, from all hues, from all genders, from all races and ethnic backgrounds and religious experiences. It is tremendous. And it shows us that we have the ability to come together, to work together, and to create and to dismantle systemic racism, dismantle prejudice, to dismantle bigotry that harms all of us so that we can be propelled to a much more just nation. So I'm very excited about the work that you're doing, the work that our collective communities are doing. And I have a sense that when you are elected as the first openly gay man to go into the House, and I'm elected as the first African American woman from District 1 in the Senate, we will have responsibilities and obligations on our shoulders that will continue to go with us to Little Rock. We will have obligations to hold each other and ourselves and our peers accountable to what we know we are sent there to do as their representatives.
I know that goes on. I've said many times with my campaign that my campaign is based on stories. The reason I say that is because that's how I tell who I am. I tell the stories of my life. I think the same can be said of you or really any candidate. We tell the story of who we are. That's how you decide as a voter whether or not this is someone you identify with and someone you support.
Right.
And I've said many times that I know when I walk through those doors in Little Rock, I don't walk through those doors alone.
Correct.
I walk through those doors with every individual that has gotten me to this point in my life. And I carry every story that's been told to me, both before, during, and after this campaign is over. And that's what inspires me to do the work that I want to do. You know, I got into this because I care. And I think that it can all pretty much be summed up into something I say frequently on the posts on my social media pages of make tomorrow better together.
Oh, I like that.
And because that's the only way we will.
I like
is with this solidarity.
Right. And I think we do have our work cut out for us. We have our work cut out for us. But I think having the conversations individually, ensuring that, and this is having our work cut out for us to get to Little Rock. Let's be honest. We both have uphill battles to overcome in order to be successful. But we have to believe that we can, and that our districts are such that they embrace what we represent, and that we will represent them.
Yeah. And I think that something that we're seeing right now is the world is ready for change.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, that's something that's very inspiring in both of our campaigns is even though we may be running at what's on the surface a very complicated time to run for office, I don't think we could be running at any better time.
Right.
You and I both, and so many of the candidates that I'm so happy to be in the cohorts with here in NWA, are running because we believe it's time for change. And the world is ripe for that. The world is just boiling. I can't think of a good word for it, but
it is.
Desperate for it.
Desperate for it, crying out for it.
Yes.
And, the challenge that we have now is to reach out to our communities, the people that are watching, and to leverage that passion, leverage that energy, leverage that fire and fervor for change, so that it continues. Because the marches and the demonstrations will fade away.
The work does not stop there.
But the work does not stop. And so everyone has a role to play. And so as the marchers and demonstrators pass the baton, it is then they're passing it on to us. They're passing it on to corporations. They're passing it on to other community leaders to lift the baton and continue that fight to continue the issue, not give up. And, you see the passion that folks have as they're pressing forward, all walks of life, to raise this issue. We cannot drop the baton. We will not drop the baton.
Yes. And I would say that for you and I, who ideally after November will be going into state as legislators, it's particularly on us because this requires changes in legislation.
Mm-hmm.
This requires laws to be passed that support these things that people are fighting for, so that long after the protests are over, long after everyone's gone home, we've changed the laws.
Mm-hmm.
We've put in mandates for police training.
Mm-hmm.
We've put in reallocation of funds to programs that lift up and heal communities.
Right.
And so that's what I see our job as
Right.
candidates, is to stand here and say, I will do this.
Right.
I support this 100%. So please pass me the baton.
Right. And the beauty of it is we will have the voters holding us accountable, because
Yes.
ever more so important than right now is they want and need and deserve representatives who support their views. And if you can't, if you're elected, they're going to hold you accountable to making sure that we're doing the right thing. We're doing the humane thing, that we're taking care of our fellow Arkansans, that we're ensuring that the economy continues to thrive.
Yes.
Our infrastructures are strengthened, that our systems don't fall apart with the slightest bit of pressure, that our students are prepared and are well-rounded and educated and equipped to compete in the marketplace of the future, that we have access to healthcare and people aren't afraid to seek out medical care, or that they don't have to make the choice between healthcare and childcare and their housing. That's what our responsibility is. That's what people expect, and that's what people deserve.
Yes, I could not say that any better, and I agree 110%. I think that's why both of us are in this, is because
I definitely have a heart for it, and I know you do as well. The times that I've met Michael, everyone, he is just such just a pure spirit, and just so transparent with, and you can tell by the stories that he's telling, so transparent with his experiences, his passion, and what's motivating him to run for office and to seek to represent District 87.
Thank you so much for that once again. I know, I think that what we need in Little Rock is authenticity.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'll sit here and say that this is me. I'm completely transparent. What you see is what you're voting for.
And I have to tell you, one of the things that I would consider it a personal victory is to overturn that state law that you just talked about, and knowing that the incumbent in my race, the one who's in office right now, who represents District 1, is the one who sponsored that bill, propels me even further, because that type of legislation does not represent where we want to go in Arkansas. We want a much more inclusive, much more welcoming state. And you see that all across the state, people are telling you exactly what they want, and we have to give them that inclusiveness.
Yeah. I mean, that's our job, is to represent the people, and representing the people is giving them what they want.
Yeah.
That's a same thing in my district in terms of the minimum wage. Excuse me, is that the Fair Minimum Wage Act passed by well over 60% in this state. My opponent, the current incumbent, immediately went to Little Rock and tried to undo that act 3 different times. And that's one that I do talk about quite a bit, because I don't think that that's representation. I don't think attempting to undo the will of your constituency is in any way our job as representatives.
And I think one way that we have to really advocate to ensure that our constituents' voices are heard is for safe voting in November. We have no idea what the health situation is going to be in Arkansas in November. And if Georgia was any example this past week with the challenges that they had with their systems and people standing in awful long lines and just, for their primary elections, the governor has the ability to declare an excuse-free absentee ballot where you don't have to justify an explanation or excuse to vote absentee. He did it for the special elections in March. He can do it in November. And we have to advocate for that. We have to push for our constituents to ensure that they have access to safe voting. So again, they don't have to make a choice between their health and participating in the constitutional right to vote.
I mean, that seems to be a common theme here in this conversation, is choosing between your health and something that is a basic right.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree completely. It's one of those, there's no reason that we shouldn't have no excuse absentee ballot voting in November. I think that if our governor truly is concerned with the health of the citizens of Arkansas, of the people of Arkansas, he will support that. I mean, that's my statement.
We can press for that. We can urge our networks and the people that are in our communities to ask for it, to vote for it, to advocate for it, to push for it, to write for it, to call for it. So
do all those things at the same time.
Yeah. So that the will of the people be known, and that they want access to safe voting.
And that's one where I think that plays into that classic statement of an active democracy is a healthy democracy.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't just apply to voting. That applies to putting pressure on your representatives, putting pressure on your state officials, email, call, write letters, however you want to do that. But you have to remain active, because once again, this is how things change.
Right.
Is by never stopping.
It's so true. So Michael, how do people get more information about your campaign?
You can go to www.michaelforarkansas.com. And so that's going to be Michael for Arkansas, completely spelled out.
Okay.
Or you can go to our Facebook page by the same name of Michael for Arkansas. Also, I invite people to send me an email if they have a personal question about things, either to the info@michaelforarkansas or message my Facebook page, because I absolutely love getting questions from people.
They're kind of fun, aren't they?
I like to talk.
And so for people who are unfamiliar with this campaign, of course, you can go to www.ronettafrancis.org to find out more about the platforms and the issues and the positions that I've taken for this particular campaign. There's also the Facebook page here, Ronetta Francis for Arkansas. And please drop your email address in the comments for inclusion in our newsletter distribution. Michael also has a very good and robust newsletter, so I really enjoy getting his newsletters as well, and I know you will as well as mine. So if there are any parting words, anything, Michael, you want to leave?
Mostly, I'll say once again, thank you so much for taking the time to collaborate with me on this. I always love talking to you. And I would really encourage the people in your district to pay close attention to your campaign. I think that you've got really great things to say. I think that you really want the best for your district. And quite frankly, when I get to Little Rock in November, I want you there with me.
Awesome. Well, I think it's important for us to continue to support each other now during the campaigns and going forward as well. That's the only way that we'll, as a community, as a people, we have to support each other for us to attain and maintain progress. Yes. So thank you so much, Michael, for agreeing to come to our Coffee with the Candidates segment. And thank you for sharing your time and your passion with us. For you all, thank you so much for sticking with me during this journey. Thank you for entrusting some of your time and getting to know more about me and more about Michael. Of course, drop us a comment if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. I will leave you with stay well and be safe, and peace and blessings to each of you. Thank you.